This is your go-to podcast dedicated to getting the exclusive scoop from the industry's top influencers that are helping to shape the cybersecurity, audit, and IT governance landscape. Tune in as we dig deep and learn their motivators, explore their industry journey, and investigate their ideas and predictions on what the future holds. This is ISACA's Cyber Pros. Welcome to the show.
Hi, my name is Brandt, Director of Professional Practices and Innovation here at ISACA. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Jenai Marinkovic. You know, I love the fact that you partnered with a chief people officer, right? And
competitive advantage.
Absolutely. You know, and to me, I think our industry is almost a leading indicator, because if you look at the research, we used to say lifelong learning. And if you look at the research, right, or the writings on that right now, it's actually matured and morphed into lifelong employability, which largely speaks to what you just talked about vulnerability. Listen, anxieties, like all of this stuff, these physiological responses that, largely speaking, we're not very good at, right? When you look at some of the mental health challenges that are out there. And again, it's one of these things, it's like, and even in my former occupation within the military, like, it's absolutely tragic, some of these, you know, to hear, you know, folks that take their lives in these type of roles. And it's like, we can't solve it overnight. But to me, I think what you said was really important, is not only is it career killing attributes, but what are the attributes that really are going to prevent you from some kind of enjoyable life? Like, we're, first of all, we're not meant to do life alone. Like, at the end of the day, that's not the species at large. So that's definitely, you know, a challenging thing there. So you had talked about initially some of the different, the 4 components to the program. Anything else you want to add about that? I do know, like, I think that we had talked about how you use our data to influence that.
Yes.
So I would love for you to highlight that and how and what you're seeing so far, albeit I do believe that, you know, we're still in the midst of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's several different areas of the State of Security report that helped inform us as to what we needed to, you know, what were the skills that we really needed to hyper focus on based on the industry. I mean, your thumb is on the pulse of, certainly on the GRC side of, what hiring managers are actually looking for in terms of bringing people on board. And so there's a couple of kind of key areas. Identified that hands-on cybersecurity experience, 73%, that means qualified. Right. So whatever we did, we knew that we were going to have to make sure that there was an applied component, but a real applied component. We identified that the top skills gaps were soft skills, cloud computing, and then security controls. And so we over-index on soft skills. We make sure that from day one, the teams, they're set up in teams and they reconfiguring different teams to work together to solve different things. We make sure that they present. In VR, all of the students have to get on a TED Talk stage and have to be able to present. We teach them how to build presentations and decks. We teach them design, so they understand things such as personas and archetypes and how to communicate based on that. So we hyper focus on all of those, including problem solving and critical thinking, but cloud computing. So one of the things that the Cloud Security Alliance has done, and they're one of our key partners, and so I want to say thank you very much to the Cloud Security Alliance, is that they work with us so that all the students are able to take the CCSK, and they donate that for some of our students. And so one of the things we're able to do is then deliver a cloud security, a basic cloud security curriculum and the certification attached to that. And then controls. We teach ISO 27001, and we decided to focus on 27001 because out of all the frameworks, obviously not NIST 800-53, that's too much for a junior person. ISO does a couple of things. One, it teaches you how to build a program end to end. And the key thing is that it's risk-based, which is another thing that came out of the State of Security, is like this focus on risk, this understanding of risk. And so we teach the students how to perform risk assessments, how to do an asset inventory well, how to do business impact analyses. And then they actually, as part of the apprenticeship, some of them get the chance either to participate in building an ISO 27001 program, or they get the opportunity to audit one. And so that way they understand the basics of what a program kind of should like. They understand controls. They understand cloud security. They're coming to the table with a set of communication skills and human skills that others don't have. And those are just a couple of things, like right off the bat, that we end up teaching the students that come out of port.
That's awesome. So you brought up VR a couple of times. So talk to me, why the metaverse?
Yeah. So what happened with our last class is I cannot tell you the number of risk assessments they had to do. Because what we would do is we would identify a company, it didn't matter what, and you, based on public information, had to reverse engineer their tech stack. And then you had to run it through an asset inventory. And then after that, you had to perform a risk assessment based on what you knew about that company. And they did it over and over and over again against so many companies. And do you know, when it came for them to interview, that many of them could not define risk? And so my heart, my heart dropped. And then I took a step back and I was like, wait a minute. Risk is hard. Risk is way harder than I think I gave. I didn't give credit to 20 years of experience and business knowledge necessary to be able to do a simple risk assessment. I didn't give value to that. And so we had to figure out a way, how do you get more engagement? How do you get the retention of a lot of this information so that it's not just I'm going through the motions, I actually understand what I'm doing? And so we took a step back and identified that metaverse might be an option. And so dove in and started building out the curriculum, and said, at first we were going to do it so that it's like one class a week. And then we're like, no, that's not how you learn. If you're going to do it, let's do it right. And we go all in, and which means that we go all in on all the mistakes and we go all in on all the failures. And so redesigned the curriculum for this group of students. So all the students get VR headsets. We work with a platform called Engage VR, and they learn how to present content in a virtualized environment. They learn how to build worlds. So you have the opportunity from just a flat floor and a white sky to be able to build these in amazing worlds based on the message and the information you're trying to communicate. If I'm talking to Shell and we want to give a presentation on an oil rig, guess what? We can. If we're doing a presentation where we're talking about cybersecurity in a hospital, there's a hospital, we can do that, right? You can create the environment. But here is the big key. A couple things. One is you can't multitask. I have you for an hour or till that headset dies. So that means that I have your attention. The next thing is that you have to change the way you present in VR, because you can't see the same way. Even if you have a 50-foot screen in there, small text doesn't translate. So what that means is that the students have to engage and re-engage with the information in a way that it forces them to learn. The next is that VR lends itself to storytelling. And at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're telling stories based on the information that we've collected in a way that allows people to make decisions. So how do you tell a story? How do you take all of this information we've gathered and tell a story? VR is designed for being able to do that. And so by combining the curriculum and teamwork, they learn how to work together in teams. You don't know how hard it is to work in VR until you tell everybody to line up and create a screen and want everybody to just line up their screens. It took 45 minutes to get everybody to be able to do it. But what it does is it teaches us how to operate inside of VR. And so what we found is that the engagement levels are higher, the ability to articulate risk is a lot better. And that just the emotional impact of being in a virtualized environment instead of Zoom, is positive. But here's one other big thing. The metaverse is not a gimmick. It's not a game. It's real. And I don't think we're giving its just due when it comes to cybersecurity, and not just the idea of responsible for protecting the systems on the outside, but actually there is a place for cybersecurity people to be inside VR as part of that protection and defense team. If you think of malicious, avatar bots, right, as malicious code, as malware, a lot of these things are going to be detected by people inside the system and not just outside the system. And if we're having to work together to protect and defend these environments, like I said, it took 45 minutes to get people to just line up. So what do we think it's going to be like having people inside VR working together as teams? So the only way to fix it, the only way to do that is to be able to do it in VR and make no mistake, adversaries are already doing it.
So let me ask you something. So, and obviously, with my work previously with the Performance Testing Council, like the crane industry was actually was using it for certified, right? And there's so many benefits, right? At the end of the day, so you don't have to worry about logistics of moving large equipment and all that stuff. But one of the things that I recall coming up here was people with spatial issues. Have you encountered that yet in your program, or was it something you considered when designing the program?
So, and with spatial issues, because I want to make sure that I answer this correctly, because there was a lot of learnings from a biological and emotional perspective of VR. So when you say spatial issues, do you mean, what exactly do we mean?
Well, more so like people that are, and it's probably broader, but like with dizziness and like,
oh, yes.
like folks that just, again, it would trigger things that was abnormal. And some of them are like, throw your hands up in the air. So where there's a lot of success, it almost becomes a barrier then to some as well.
So that is part of user experience design. And yes, so in fact, it was interesting because I remember when I first started and I thought the whole woozy thing was like, whatever, I can totally take it. And there's a way that in some of these environments, when you're creating them, that you're able to fly around and see everything from a 360 degree angle. And so all of a sudden, I got nauseous. And I had to take the headset off, and it took me a minute in order to like regain and be able to get in there. And so, yes, people can get woozy. And so when we design things, we need to design that. So I'll give you an example. When you design it so that you transition from one world to the next, you need to fade to black and then fade back into the world because you're tricking the brain. If you just go from I'm on the beach to boom, I'm on the moon, it's disjointing to the brain. So you have to consider that. I was teaching the students, how do you choose your sky and how do you choose your floor based on the emotion that you're trying to engage for that user? And so I made the whole floor a lake, right? Everywhere you could see, it was just water, got somebody dizzy. And so it's like, woo, right? Because they're looking at the ground and they ended up getting dizzy. People are afraid of birds. Birds are triggering to people. Don't use birds. And so a lot, yes. Can people end up getting dizzy, woozy, and so forth, especially if you're sick? So if you have a cold or the flu, a lot of times it hurts to wear those goggles. People can get those issues. And what I would say as designers, we have to be considerate of that. We have to understand our users and create an environment where we don't have things that trigger them and we don't have things that make them nauseous.
That is actually, you nailed the response there, because it was one of the things because it really, I don't think that a lot of emphasis has been put on the design thing. Yeah. With that regard, right? Like kind of unrelated, but it's the same thing. Like earlier this year, I had to do a balance test, and holy cow, let me tell you, not a fan. Never want to do it again. And because and it's like the medical community is aware of the response, like they know it's going to happen. So it's like, again, we're doing some of this stuff and to make sure that the right disciplines are weighing in, right? Because listen, nobody knows the human body better than science, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely you do. And in fact, there's some debate going on right now. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure where digital security fits in, but we've got a place. So you've got one of the things is that with VR, obviously we have a haptic response, so I can feel a buzz. I've got some type of biofeedback going on. What can happen is that you can abuse that. And when somebody is abused inside a virtual environment, oftentimes it's worse than if it happens in the physical world, because it replays in our head over and over again. And when you then go back into VR, it's very triggering. So there's this emotional impact to people being touched in a way that they don't want to be touched, and hurt. And so the question is that, some people have it so that you cross your arms or you put your hands up and so forth. But what we do know is that when people are scared, oftentimes trying to tell them that they have to do complex movements in order to put up a barrier, that's just, they're not going to remember it. They're scared. They're going to panic. And so the question is that an avatar, that's you. And in the physical world, a combination of, say, human resources and physical security would be responsible. Maybe your management is responsible for designing the controls so that you feel safe inside that physical environment. Who's responsible for that? Right? It cannot be just the people, the user experience designers, right? It can't just be the architects. These are digital controls that are put in place to protect the mental and emotional state of a real human. So that argues almost for physical security as well as digital security, participating to figure out, exactly, and psychologists and psychiatrists and sociologists as well, to kind of figure out how do you design a virtualized environment in a way that people feel safe, because the emotional impacts are great. I'll give you an example. I was in with a class of students, and we had just learned that when you shake somebody's hand, or you touch controllers to each other, you got a buzz. And so for the first time, because, this was before, we were all able to go outside again, we could shake each other's hand, and it was so cool. And then somebody was uncomfortable about it. So we stopped everything, took a step back and said, okay, you must get people's permission to shake their hand, right? We've got to engage people. You don't just walk up to somebody in the physical world and just touch them. And so the digital world is the same. And so there were those learnings as well, certainly tied to cybersecurity workforces as we get into VR. But it's, to just illustrate that you are 100% correct. And there's a lot of things that we've got to think through, because the implications to the human and the human psyche are pretty great.
I'm actually blown away, like the amount of information that you have collected on that and are aware of, and that you're actually taking in consideration. This is exactly, it reinforces how interdisciplinary our world is, right? Like it is, like tech permeates everything and the things that we're trying to do. And and arguably, like, that's what's frustrating, right? Like, we talk about self-inflicted gunshot wounds within cybersecurity, and even in the broader sense of technology, where we think we're this solution to everything, and that's just not necessarily the case. Like, tech doesn't replace everything, and it ties back to, you talked about, there are jobs that are going to go away. We need to help people to transition. But there's also this belief, like, that automation is this panacea, and it's going to make up for all these people, right? And what I think folks are losing track of, and to me, if anything, your points just validated my stance on this, is that all it is a shell game of human capital at this point, because you might recoup some gains here on some lower level tasks, but then you need folks that are on the design, the algorithms, the auditing. Like, all we're doing is shifting it around. It's not really a true positive gain, if you will.
Yeah. So, and certainly in cybersecurity, that's the way that, like, I see it now. I just, to me, we're, and I hate to go a little bit out there, but it's happening. And that is, it's not just about terrestrial based security, right? We're going to be on the moon, we're going to be on Mars, we're going to be, with permanent installations and communications going back and payloads going back and forth between all of these different points. Payloads worth trillions of dollars. Right, and the idea is that that stuff is safe is not the case. There, if there's something of value, it's going to get stolen, which means that cybersecurity people are not just going to be here on this planet. Like, the opportunities are going to be pretty wide. So we need more people, and we need more people who think differently. And so to me, it's like those jobs are going to go away. And automation is not a panacea, but there's jobs that are going to get automated. It's just going to happen. So there needs to be a place for those people to go. When we look at going back to the third industrial revolution, I was born in Indiana. I was born in Gary, Indiana, which was a steel mill town. And, just a very, when we look at the town and how much money it was able to make and so forth, it did really well until the collapse of the steel industry, in which case the whole region ended up, taking a massive hit, and some of these places never recovered. And, that's what happens when you have a monoculture of industries, right? And if that gets automated away, what happens with all of those people? And so for me, those people are smart, right? Those people, if they are really amazing at their jobs, if we just retrain them and teach them a new vocabulary and a way of thinking, they have an opportunity to go into an industry that is never going to suffer massive unemployment, that is only going to continue growing and will go past this planet.
That point you just made, it anchors my belief, like that the entire learning continuum needs to be at the same table, right? If you look at there's a program out in North Dakota that I wrote about, I think last year I became aware of it. Absolutely. To me, it is almost the blueprint textbook. This is what we should be doing across the U.S., the North Dakota K-20W program. And it was this public-private partnership. It involved, helping to provide resources. Then there was some upskilling involved. It shaped academic standards. And because what's happening right now is, and we can be doing great in one aspect of the journey, but we have this university system at large that is largely for profit, right? They need to exist. And I'm not necessarily convinced that they're tied to outlooks like BLS data to say, hey, in 5 years we see this decline, because there's folks that are researching that. To your point, like, we know yes, some things happen and they're emergent, and they take root quickly, but very rarely is that the case. Like, we're not very good at looking at the indicators, right? Of demise, almost, right? An indicator of demise. Yeah, well, let's coin that one, right? Like, of what's going to happen to an industry 5, 10, 15 years down the road. What are the things that are going to shape it, and how are we going to prevent folks? Because there's a lot of folks that have that went through programs to prepare themselves for jobs, and then when they got out there, it was like, there's no opportunity.
Yeah,
and that's a disservice, right?
Especially if they're paying for it,
right?
So like with veterans, I get a little sad because some of the programs will accept money from your GI Bill. And, and if you don't come out of that program with like a big lift in compensation or, the right job, I mean, that's something you could have given to your kids. There's really real human impacts to this. And I think part of it is that what's the goal? So at GRCIE, we said fit for purpose day one. We said you need to be fit for purpose day one. And if you reverse yourself from that, then I think what that does is that gives you the opportunity to kind of think outside of the box of everything that you need in order to be fit for purpose and where the real big gaps are. So it makes you realize that, as an example, we focus on teaching the students business and understanding organizational design in different types of corporations. and what those roles are and how those roles map to the applications and the services that they provide, right? And the reason is that we ended up having to teach it in order to get them to understand the asset inventory, so it can't be just focusing on making sure that I can get these certifications and I can do these activities, right? It's more than that. I need to understand process. I need to understand how this activity fits within the bigger process, and how do I make sure I do a good job so that my people upstream and downstream are hooked up, so I've got to understand teamwork. We work in teams in corporations, and a lot of times people don't even have the skills of working in modern collaboration platforms. So you got to teach that. That takes time. So I think that by understanding that the end goal is to get you ready for this job, and not necessarily broadly to go into any job. I think that allowed us to then really start to diagnose what it takes in order to get somebody to be ready for the job.
Yeah. So as we get ready to conclude here, I got a couple other points, right? Because I really want to make sure that we're getting the right message out to folks. So talk to me, like, with your journey with GRCIE, what was the significant learning event or aha moment, like during this thing, that you just made you just stop in your tracks?
Let's see. So I think a couple, I know I've harped on risk, but it was that I think the biggest thing is we completely underestimated everything that goes into understanding risk. So I think that's one of the big aha moments. Identity and access management audits. If you make me do one, I own a farm. I'd rather clean a pig pen. I do not like doing identity and access management audits. Identity and access management audits are one of the best ways to teach some of the fundamentals of cybersecurity, especially given that IAM attacks are some of the top attacks that we end up dealing with. And so, we found that risk and identity and access management, and like really hyper focusing on those areas, ultimately help the students, be better prepared. I think another one is teaching the students how to not answer interview questions, but to talk through how they would solve it. You're not going to have the answer. You're junior. There's like no way. And if you give an answer, you're not really going to be able to like describe why you gave that answer. I think what hiring authorities really want is they want to understand how you think. And so to demonstrate how you would think yourself out of this challenge and how you would solve it is one of the things that we were working with the students that we felt like we really needed to hone in. And then I think the final one is that as you're teaching, you made mention of kind of like the social issues and the cultural issues that oftentimes people come to the table with. And so what we did is we started partnering with local community organizations. So one of the things that we're going to try and do is build a class of GRCIE in a community. Because if we get the chance to increase all of those people's compensations, imagine the beneficial impact it has on that local community and like really being able to establish generational wealth. Well, if you're going into some of these communities, you're sometimes dealing with trauma, significant trauma, and we're remote. We're not going to be able to solve some of those problems. And so that by partnering with a local organization that can help us, it takes a village to get somebody across the finish line. So partnering with these local organizations that can help satisfy some of those societal and cultural and personal things that they're going to need. Both of our organizations are able to work together in order to deliver, people that are going to be productive within their companies. I think those were the big learnings for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely, to me, you are on the absolute right path, and I'm so excited for you. So you talked about the program, roughly 6 months. What services do you provide to the students?
Sure. So obviously we put them through the academy. They get the hands-on experience. We help them. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has taught LinkedIn classes, resume classes, interview classes, for the students. We've been really fortunate. So the students get prepped for the interview. Melissa works with each student once they get an offer to negotiate an appropriate package. One of the reasons that we tend to be lower on the pay scale is that when we first start off in our careers, we start off lower than everybody else. So if we can get parity, and she helps provide that, right, and providing the language, they get that. They get mentorship, and then after they've graduated from the program, if they want to brush up on their skills or they need a mentor, they need guidance, we provide those services to them afterwards as well.
Mentorship is so key to this, right? How many programs that are out there today are just what I would call fire and forget?
Yeah.
Get through the program, you're on your own. There's no guarantee of job placement, right? Which is part of the challenge. How many folks have gone through programs and they have skills atrophy because they can't get employment. So what I love about your program here is that we broaden our view of what experience is, you're providing it, because overwhelmingly our data says that experience is the number one indicator as to what would make you a well-qualified candidate. So what is a company that wants to hire GRCIE or its graduates, how do they get in touch with you all?
Sure. So a couple of different ways. One is go to GRCIE, GRC, that's C as in Charlie, IE.org, and go to the contact us page. So you can reach us there. You can also reach us at hello@GRCIE.org. And then we have our GRCIE LinkedIn channel, which I highly recommend that people come and check out. We've actually done several weeks of breaking down the ISACA State of Security report with a hyper focus on empathy and our empathy challenges. But there's some really great stuff there. So you can also link up with us on LinkedIn.
Excellent. So what can, as an industry, what can we do to help organizations such as yourself?
Sure. So GRCIE is a 501c3 nonprofit. We just got our status. We're super excited.
Awesome.
So being a nonprofit, donations are always welcome, but there's other ways that you can help us. One, especially if you've got any of the skills that we've talked about, we're always looking for teachers to be able to teach just a singular course so that the students get messages from different people. So that mentorship, if you'd like to offer mentorship to the students, we'd love to talk to you. One of the big ways is that, again, the way that we're able to fund this in-depth education for the students is through the apprenticeship program. So if you have, a need, everything we do is in teams. So whether it's a risk assessment, asset inventory, an audit, or helping to build out a program. These are things that you actually get a virtual CISO as part of it, but, you get, 4 to 5 students working together to ultimately solve the problem. So if you have those types of opportunities, and then the big one is please hire our students. They are amazing and they have such amazing stories. When you hire somebody from GRCIE, you're bringing on not only all of that training, but you're bringing on somebody who's just really brave and has perseverance and the grit, to be successful and thrive in making your organization successful.
Awesome. So last question is, I do believe you had told me that you're getting ready to complete another class here soon.
Yes.
How many program graduates so far?
Let's see. So far, well, we've got 9 that will be coming across the finish line with this one. And we had 15, with our last class. So 24, 25 students across the finish line thus far.
That is absolutely awesome. Jenai, I want to thank you for your time. I can't praise you enough, right? Like seriously, like we have such a good time together. We obviously didn't get enough time to dig into a couple other issues. We're going to talk again because there's so much to talk about, but I wanted to make sure that we get your message out. So I'm going to give you the final word. Is there anything that I didn't touch on that you really think that needs to be put out there before we close?
I think, just a couple of very quick things. And, first off, I want to thank every single human being and entity that has helped us. All of the money goes to teaching students. And so everybody, you made a difference with changing these people's lives. So for me, it's I want to make sure that people understand that GRCIE at the end of the day is about gratefulness. And we're grateful for all of that. And I think we didn't get really a chance to talk about this problem that we've got in our industry about empathy. And I'd love to be able to dig in on it because, empathy, one of the ways that you solve empathy, right, that you make sure you inject empathy is through diverse lived experiences. And so the more diversity we bring into our groups, the more empathetic we will be. And as an industry, that's going to be key to our survival. So, I wanted to, point that home.
That was obviously the one big point that I had hoped we had gotten to. We will have another conversation. That is my personal guarantee to you. We will get that on the books here a little later this year. I absolutely want to dig into that. Thank you again. Absolute pleasure here. With that said, I'm John Brandt. This is Cyber Pros. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To listen to more podcasts from ISACA, please visit isaca.org/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for upcoming episodes.